So I think I have. Look, something has happened here.
Okay, let it be there right now. We have already gone live now. So, okay, so this is the first day of our PhD presentations, uh, and this is the evening slot. And in this evening slot, we are going to have uh, presentations by these scholars, and they will make a presentation on these topics also. Let me share a screen so we can have a look at their topics. Okay, so in this slot, we will start the presentation with Pallavi Gupta, and she will make presentation on the art of literary research. It will be followed by Prakruti Bhatt, and she will read on snowballing, a technique for literary research. After that, Ruchi Joshi will make a presentation on the scholar's life, code of manners and ethics. Thereafter, Smita Gadhvi will read presentation on MLA Handbook, 8th and ninth edition. After that, Surbhi Goswami will make presentation on principles of inclusive language. Thereafter, Vipul Dabhi will read on the scholar's life. After that, Vrutti Dabhi will make presentation on tools and techniques of literary research. And the final presentation of the day on research methodology will be by Yogeshvari Trivedi on plagiarism and academic integrity. So let us start our day with the first presentation of the day. So Pallavi Gupta, you can come and start with your presentation.
This is Pallavi Gupta, and today I am going to give a presentation on the art of literary research. Okay, the art of literary research. There are few points to consider at the beginning of any research. Like research is a discovery of truth, meaning of being a researcher, the aims and objectives of literary research, qualitative research, its meaning and modes. Research is a discovery of truth. As Richard Altick says, all literary students are dedicated to the same task, the discovery of truth. It is to uncover which was heretofore hidden. Sir William Haley says, life is a continuous process of finding the holes and plugging them and making as few new ones as possible. So a researcher is to find out the holes and plugging them and getting a connection over the holes and making some new holes if possible, if he has any ideas. What is the meaning of being a researcher? A researcher is more concerned with facts rather than criticism or imagination. He or she is more than a critic or a poet. When we see, let's have an example. When we see in A Cup of Tea, the short story by Catherine Mansfield, we see that Philip Fell is the hero and Rosemary Fell is the heroine, the central character of the story. Rosemary Fell brought a girl to her home, Miss Smith. She is a beggar. Rosemary Fell wants to help the girl, the beggar. But what happens at the end? Rosemary Fell doesn't help her as she wanted to help, but give some money and let her go out of the house just because of Philip Fell uh, admires her beauty, the beauty of Miss Smith. So a critic will just find out that the change of the behavior in Rosemary Fell, but a scholar will find out that yes, it is not Rosemary Fell, but it is Philip who has turned the end. A researcher is more than a poet. Let's see an example. For an example, let's take another story from Catherine Mansfield. That is Bliss. In Bliss, the heroine Bertha looks at the pear tree, which is on its full blossom. She thinks that the pear tree is blossoming because of her happiness. The poet will say that the pear tree is just giving the example of her happiness, but the scholar will see that a human being, when he or she is happy or not happy, looks the same feeling in the beauty of nature. So a researcher is more than a critic, more than a poet. He or she has his or her own angle. A research scholar is a scholar who has wide, who has read widely, broadly. Thus, researches those have been done previously, as we see in our literature review. He or she is an investigator of philosophical ideas and the happenings. Aims and objectives of literary research: a systematic investigation for the purpose of gaining new knowledge with the help of broad study through knowledge of what has been done in the past already. Discover new facts and fresh interpretation of the known facts. It is to formulate new theories and verify data and facts which have already been existing. Doing research means the aim is it is also the revision of accepted laws or theories in the light of the new fact, either adding something new or verifying the original data and facts of an existing theory and seeing whether it still proves true. As literature is an expression of man's problem and aspirations, and it studies men in all walks of life. Let's see the features of qualitative research. Qualitative research study things in their natural settings in an effort to discover the meanings seen by those who are being researched or subjects rather than that of the researcher. According to Danzin and Lincoln, qualitative research focuses on interpretation of phenomena in their natural settings to make sense of the meanings people bring to these settings. Qualitative research involves collecting information about personal experiences, historical interactions, and visual text which are significant moments and meaningful in people's life. In qualitative research, the data is non numerical. There are few modes of qualitative research. One of them is ethnography. As a form of inquiry, ethnography relies heavily on participant observation, on the researcher participating in the setting or with the people being studied, at least in some marginal role, and seeking to document in detail patterns of social interaction and the perspective of participants, and to understand these in their local context. Grounded theory. The methodology involves the construction of hypotheses and theories through the collecting and analysis of data. Discourse analysis. It is an approach to the analysis of written, vocal, or sign language use or any significant semiotic event. Interactive phenomenological analysis. It is an approach to psychological qualitative research with an ideography focus, which means that it aims to offer insight into how a given person in a given context makes sense of given phenomenon. Last but not the least, philosophical traditions, morality, ethics, phenomenology, existentialism, and there are many more. The sources that I have got from the book The Art of Literary Research by Richard Altick, a YouTube link, and Dr. Dilip Barad's a lecture on qualitative research. Thank you. Is there any question to ask? Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, first, yeah, put the question in the comments so I can display the question on the screen. So you have to put the question in the live stream of YouTube. Yes, everybody remember this. You have to put a question in the live stream of YouTube. So we can StreamYard will help us uh, display the question on the screen when you are reading the question. So you have to be ready in your mobile phone. You might have kept your YouTube open so you can very quickly give a comment there. Check a link and everything in advance so that we can save our time while the live stream is going on. So we'll have two scholars, at least two scholars asking question to the presenter. There can be many more questions also. So Prakruti and Ruchi, we are waiting for your question to display.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, so my question is, how is literary research different or distinct from research in any other field of knowledge? Is there any characteristic which can distinguish it from research in any
I
other
will
field?
study and answer you that.
Okay, sure.
This all things are recorded. Remember this. People will watch it. Master students will watch it. Future PhD scholars will watch it. Someday your students also will watch it. So you have to give qualitative answers. You can't escape by just giving any answer, because if the first presenter will not give proper answer, then many will get an idea that we also will be able to escape from giving a proper answer by just telling that I will study and then answer to the question.
Okay, give me few
I'm still
seconds. I will
waiting
answer.
for the questions in the streamline YouTube stream. I'm not getting the question. Prakruti, Ruchi.
uh, how to find qualitative research when we do have numbers of resources, and nowadays we have a list of new journals coming up each day. So is there any suggestion you can share with us?
Yes, for qualitative research, we should find out the author. We should find out the resource where it is published.
Okay, next presenter we can take. Yeah. And be alert. Still you are not alert to what you are supposed to do. You have to keep the live stream open in your mobile phone so you can quickly type the question. And then I can display the question on the screen when you are asking. I'm still waiting for the two questions. Well, Prakruti and Ruchi has not typed the question yet. Ruchi's question now is coming here. You can also ask question in the comment, and a written answer can be given by the presenter also. Written answer can be given later on by the presenter. So you have to read the live comments in the live stream, and if somebody is asking you questions, then you have to answer there in written form also. Yes, you can. Yeah, first make your presentation and then you can do that. But other students be alert now. Now who will have to be alert? Ruchi and Smita. Both of you have to be alert in asking the question.
Is it visible? Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. So my topic for presentation for today is Introduction to Snowballing. It's a method of literary research, and we'll see how it works. So what do we mean by snowballing? So it's actually a kind of a non-probability sampling technique. Now, what do we mean by non-probability? Basically something that is not random, something that is subjective, a kind of technique that is kind of sampling technique that is subjectively decided by the research scholar or someone who is collecting data, someone who is collecting samples. So, a kind of non-probability sampling technique, which was developed in around the 1960s by James Coleman and Leo Goodman. You have the names there. And Goodman is the one who is providing a kind of a definition for the very first time in 1961 for snowballing. And he says, I quote, a random sample of individuals is drawn from a given finite population, unquote. Now, what do we mean by this definition? Basically, someone who is included in a particular existing sample will be approached to provide more samples for collecting the data. So, for example, if I am collecting data from a set of individuals, let's say 50 people, and at some point in my research, I might require more data, like more samples for justifying my arguments. Then I'll approach those 50 people, so because they already know my motive, they already know my objective for collecting the data, and therefore I will approach them again and tell them to include more people, like people whom they know, approach people who may be able to provide some kind of significant contribution to the sampling collection method. And therefore that is the idea of snowballing. Now, initially, it was introduced as a kind of a technique for research in the social sciences field, mostly in psychology and sociology, where you have to collect more and more numbers of data and to justify your arguments, that is, right? But nowadays, you can use this particular method for literary research also, that is, research in literature proper, right? So, how do we do it? That is the question. Well, in terms of literary research, snowballing can be understood in the context provided by Clay Wolin, as you can see in the screen. This particular person quotes using the reference list of a paper or the citations to the paper to identify additional papers. So, for example, if you're looking for content or pieces of information regarding your topic of research, right, you can approach the existing list of papers, research papers, or research articles, right, and then look at the references section of that particular research paper to look for more relevant information regarding your research topic, right? So that is how you do snowballing in the context of literary research, in the context of research in the literature field. So, for literary research, snowballing can be understood as a technique through which one can identify relevant pieces of information to justify their arguments, and this will later on help you in providing a kind of a literature review, a structured literature review section. This particular technique is also helpful in planning your own structured bibliographic database, right? A collection of research papers which you can approach every time you want to have new information or you want a deeper understanding of a particular topic. So you can just look at the references section in a particular research paper, and then you will find a list of works which they have cited, and then you can sift through that particular list and see which one is relevant or useful for you,
right? So that is a kind of snowballing technique which you can employ for your literary research. Now, what are the steps? How do we proceed? Right? So, there are 5 steps, 5 basic steps which you can do. First is identify keywords and formulate search strings. Now, we live in the digital era, and therefore, employing the snowballing technique for the digital platform is very much easy, right? Because of the digital era, snowballing has become a very easy technique to employ for literary research. The first and foremost thing you should do should be to formulate some keywords with which you can search on the internet, right? Either on platforms like Google Scholar or on JSTOR or any other particular database which is providing a list of works to you for your research, right? So that is for, in order to do that, you will need certain words, certain keywords through which you can search your topic, right? So that is the first thing you need to do. Second is identify a set of papers to use, right? Now, once you have searched online, once you have searched on the Google Scholar platform, for example, you will need to move on to make a list of papers which are useful to you, right? Google Scholar will give you an entire list of works which will be using those keywords, right? Now, out of those that particular list, you will have to identify which particular paper is useful for me. Now, once you do that, you will have an entire collection of papers, right? One paper, two paper, three paper, based on your requirement. You can just make a list of your own. Now, once that is done, it will create a set of papers. It will create a collection of papers which you can use. Later on, in the third step, what you can do is whatever set of papers you have with you right now, right? You can check the reference sections of those papers, right? That is also called backward snowballing. That is, you are going back in time, right? And therefore, it is called backward snowballing, a kind of snowballing technique where you search the reference sections of the papers you have already collected, right? Now, what you need to do in the next step, the fourth step, is identify articles that had subsequently cited papers that you have included. Now, see the kind of technique which is helping you to verify time and again the information which you are using, right? In the fourth step, or also known as the forward snowballing technique, what you are doing is basically checking how many articles are citing the collection of papers which you have collected, right? So now in this case, in both these phases, Google Scholar is helping you a lot because it is already giving you the number of papers who have cited this particular source while you are collecting the list, right? And therefore, forward and backward snowballing is already happening when you use Google Scholar or JSTOR, right? Basically, reliable sources of databases, right? And ultimately, the fifth step, if you don't have any other new reference or any other new paper which is coming up after snowballing, after backward and forward snowballing, then it means your snowballing technique is complete. Now, this is a bit tricky because often we feel that there is never an end to snowballing, right? We feel that once we go through the reference list, one will lead to the other to the third one, so on and so forth. But actually, it is, in fact, ending somewhere, because not every time will you find relevant information, or not every time you will find accurate information, as we have seen earlier during one of our coursework sessions, that every time you choose a particular research paper or article, you will have to go through the 5 criterias first, right? You will have to check the quality, the accuracy, and authority, objectivity, and all those points before selection, right? So definitely the snowballing will end somewhere. So once you are not finding anything new any longer, the snowballing has ended. That is the idea. These are the 5 steps which the snowballing technique is following. I'm sorry. Yeah. Now, as I have used examples from the digital medium, this slide will give you a sort of an idea how digital medium is helping you in the snowballing technique for literary research. So the very first advantage of the digital medium is you have a lot of web platforms which are working as databases for sources of information regarding your research. Google Scholar and JSTOR are just 2 examples. For instance, for electronic literature, we already have a particular database called Electronic Literature Collection, right? So regarding your research area too, you will find such databases online. Now, why is that such an efficient medium? The reason is they are vast stores of information, right? The web is endless, so to speak, right? And therefore it can store as much information as you want to, and therefore creating such databases is now the need of the hour. Like the more databases you create, the more easy it will be for your snowballing technique to work, right? And for research scholars to find new information, right? Other than that, in comparison to traditional print sources, which we often refer to, like books or journals or magazines or newspapers, the web platforms are much more efficient. Why? One basic criteria is easy accessibility, right? In traditional print literature or print sources, what happens is often when we look through the references section, we might come across books which are very much useful for us, but the physical medium, that is the library, might not have that particular book with them in the physical form, in the printed form, that is, right? And therefore it's a big problem of accessibility, right? So the snowballing technique will find hindrances every time you go through the sections there. Other than that, it can also help in ensuring the reliability and accuracy. That is, because every time you follow the quality criteria we have already discussed, you are verifying the information time and again. Once, not just once, but time and again. Every time you come across a new source, that is what you are doing. And therefore, in traditional print forms, that is a bit difficult to do, because we often consider the authority of the book writer more than the authority of a digital writer, right? And therefore this might become a bit of a problem when it comes to the traditional print sources of information. And the digital mediums are very well useful in organizing the sources also, right? Selection process becomes very easy because they have the databases which are created are very well organized and very well systematically designed for you to easily sift through the list of sources provided there. So yeah, these are the sources which I have referred to for my presentation. And I would also like to provide a kind of a practical outlook to what I did once. I actually did snowballing for practical purposes also, because just talking won't help. So let me just go to Google Scholar. Yes. So this is what I searched for my research paper while I was working on it. And see this. Oh, okay. Let me just. Okay. Is it visible now?
We are seeing the digital mediums, your PPT last slide, yes.
Okay.
You will be able to see on the tab which tab is being shared. Blue color square will be
Okay,
there.
okay.
That tab is shared.
Mm-hmm. Then I'll have to change the. Okay, just a second. Yes, now is it visible for everyone? Okay. So here you have the Google Scholar platform, a very efficient database as we consider it. Now, here you can search for, as we have seen, we need to formulate a keyword first, right? Or a search string. So I have a keyword which I want to explore. Now, Google Scholar will give me this list of all the research articles which are using that particular keyword. Now, out of this, the first thing which you need to do is check which one is relevant for you and create a set of papers as we have discussed earlier in the presentation. So let's say, for example, the first and the second one are useful for my research paper. What will the snowballing technique do? Simply, you will just check it is cited by 4,331 people already, right? So what did this particular thing give you an idea of? Forward snowballing, right? Where you check the kind of references or the amount of people who have already cited your collected paper, right? If I'm selecting the first source, I will just need to check how many people have cited that particular source which I am choosing for myself, right? And therefore Google is very efficient. It is already giving you the number of people who have cited this particular source. Now, in terms of backward snowballing, what you can do is just click on the source, open that particular source, see. Yeah. Yeah. So in the backward snowballing, what we are doing is looking at the reference sections of the research papers which we have selected. So you can just go to the reference section of this particular source. See, these are the references they have provided. So you have all sorts of research papers which have been used, which have been employed by this particular research paper will be there. Now, something which you haven't explored through Google Scholar will be here, right? Something which was not mentioned by Scholar will be in this particular reference section. It can be any book, it can be any magazine. Now, since this particular source is already this particular paper is already very well prepared, they have used all the sources which are already there on Google Scholar, which is why you find Google Scholar being mentioned time and again beside every other source there. You can think of this as a criteria for reliability also, like the kind of sources which are using sources from Google Scholar are considered reliable because they are cited time and again by people. Only then will they be become a part of that database, right? So that is the idea. So this is backward snowballing, right? Looking at the reference section of other research paper or the research paper which you have selected for yourself. So yes, that was my presentation. I'll go back to the presentation. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Any question?
Uh, yes, it was. It's indeed very informative presentation, of course. I do have a question, that is question of reliability. If it comes to a field research, then what I found is it's quite useful for literary research rather than field research. Why? Because when it comes to a field research, scholar himself or herself is relying upon the samples. So, is it quite appropriate for field research or not? Any suggestion or any idea if you can share with us?
When it comes to snowballing, there is always a scope of bias there, like because you are relying on the people you have selected for yourself, right? Now they will again search for people who they rely on. You see the problem? So, of course, since it is a non-probability sampling technique, it is subjective, as I mentioned earlier. And therefore, for field research, it is very much a bit of a risky kind of a thing because the data collected through this particular technique will always be biased, right? But for literary research, when we apply for snowballing for literary research, it is very much useful, right? Because we are searching for new sources of information and relying only on pieces of information which are relevant to us. And therefore, you are correct when we think of it as very advantageous when it comes to literary research. As far as field research is concerned, this particular technique would be more relying on easiness, feasibility, that is. Right, snowballing is a very feasible technique for someone working in the field research kind of scenario. So yes, definitely. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, you had a question. Yeah, please.
My question is, what are the limitations of the snowball technique?
So one thing you mentioned, that is the idea of the bias. Like you are always subjective in selection of the things. Now, in terms of literary research, the snowballing will have you have to be very careful while selecting the set of papers, while selecting the keywords. Now, if you miss out on verifying the pieces of information you are collecting through the snowballing technique, it will always have a kind of a bad or negative point for your research, that is. right? And plus, often what happens is people search for things, but then they are in a way very skeptical, like, in selection when it comes to exclusion and inclusion of resources. They are very much skeptical. Now if you are using it as a very positive technique, snowballing is a very positive technique, then this will give you a lot of information which is useful to you. But if you're not using it efficiently, then it might land you in a space where you will not be able to select which one is reliable enough for me, like, and you might be confused also, because creating databases is a tough task. It's not everyone's cup of tea. So it will help you in creating a database, but at the same time you have to be very selective, you have to be very careful while preparing a list. And the idea of bias is already there. So I think these two are major drawbacks to this technique, but there are other advantages. So yeah. Anything else? Thank you. Let me just close this.
Not here, here it is private chair, so not in the. When you ask a question, unmute yourself, then mute it again after asking the question.
Sir, is my screen visible there? Very good afternoon, everyone. There isn't any kind of doubt that if men live alone and without code of manners and ethics, life together would be terribly hell or living hell. Now the question is, if we are already living with code of manners and ethics, then why we need to have distinct code of manners and ethics, or different kind of set of different code of manners and ethics for research scholar? Now it again leads us to another question, and that is scholar's life is different from others, or it is actually supposed to be different from others? Now, if our answer is obviously yes, then let's try to get the answers through this presentation. And we'll briefly touch upon the points that importance and need of the code of manners and ethics, then scholars code of manners and ethics, working together for the benefits of society, not for the private aggrandizement, then all knowledge in public domain, then property rights should be respected, then purpose, another noteworthy, there are several code of manners and ethics. We'll discuss that also. And a scholar must not contravene the very spirit of scholarship. Now, if we jump to the importance and need of code of manners and ethics, then if we justify it or if we define it in general, then we can say as uh, MC Cartney defines it in the importance of ethical behavior. That is, ethics is like almost everything else that we strive to be good at, and it requires just practice and effort. And there we can point it scholars code of manners and ethics. Richard Eldick beautifully quotes in the art of literary research that, like all professions, our has its own code of manners and ethics, and the heart of which is the proposition that we are working together for the benefit of society, not for the private aggrandizement. Now, again, it leads to a question, how then it, oops, actually, I don't know how, but this slide is not clearly visible in Google slide. Sorry for the disturbance. Actually, it works together for the benefit of society. It deals with the social issues in detail, which helps people to realize the truth and think it in a different view. Think it in a different view in the sense of, for example, scholars' works help us to justify it's okay not to be okay. For example, if we just take a feminist approach, then there will be a kind of differentiation when critic defines any particular approach and when scholar define particular approach. Then it analyze societal issues, and sometimes, not just sometimes, but many a time it becomes a bit difficult to accept it, and that's why we are supposed to point it as sometimes it's provide us a solution to solve the problem. Then, as literature records the real life events from the society and converts it into the fictional world, or and these mundane activities into the fiction. Now here, scholars perform the duty to decode it and share it with the society. Then scholars endorse social well-being and to prevent or lessen social harms through the research. For example, if literature reflects society, then scholars serves a beacon light which guide to the people. Then they present them to the society as a mirror in which people may look at their own images and they can make amendments if or wherever these are necessary. And one of the very significant point that we can also point out here, that is, many times it also happens that even the most representative writers of a given time cannot express a complete picture of particular time or era of particular time or in era in which he or she is living. Now, on that basis, it would lead to the idea that a writer conveys the truth and necessarily the historical and the social truth. That we know it's not so. The way it is presented, we cannot consider it as historical facts. So here also, scholar decodes this and their roles comes into a play. Then all knowledge in public domain. Eltic mentions as scientists and technicians may have their patents, but in human learning, all knowledge is the public domain. Here, scholars are expected to publish and disseminate the result of their research in open, honest, transparent, and in accurate manners, and via all appropriate media such as journals, papers, books, reviews, and data repository or conference proceedings. But it should be in a public domain. When we are discussing this, property rights should be respected and all knowledge in a public domain. I found very interesting lines from the selected writings of Thomas Jefferson. He mentions as if he who receives an idea from me receives instruction himself without lessening mine, as he who lights his taper at mine receives light without darkening me. So the idea should freely spread from one to another over the globe for the moral and mutual instruction of a man and improvement of his condition. Seems to have been peculiarity and benevolently designed by the nature like fire, expansible over all space without lessening their density any point, and like the air in which we breathe, move and have our physical being, incapable of confinement or exclusive appropriation. Sorry, again, I don't know why, but again, this slide is not clearly visible in Google slide. Now, what's the purpose of property rights for the research scholar? Now, any small piece of research is the product of innovative, diligent, and creative and intellectual effort. So it should be tagged as, or it is intellectual property. So first and foremost thing that first and foremost thing for the scholars, that is to share credits and courtesy, obviously. Then scholars are required to familiarize themselves with strictly and observe the terms and conditions relating to and confidentiality in any research, grant, contract, or any collaboration. Second thing we can point out here, that is uh, they are supposed to record their path so others can use it as a as as previous scholars property. And then their scholars are expected to respect their respect property created by others and use it only with appropriate permissions and fully comply with all relevant credits and courtesy. There are some of the noteworthy, we can point out codes of manners and ethics, which is mentioned by Altic in Art of Literary Research, that differences of opinions, there will always be lapses of judgment and imperfection of knowledge will sometimes call for a comment. Otherwise, literary study would stagnate, complacent in its intellectual lethargy and spotted with uncorrected errors. So, but with this necessary process of debate and correction can and should be conducted with dignity and courtesy. And with this also, even if there is a controversy or dilemma or crisis, controversial point can be made effectively and adequately without betraying the ancient association of scholarship uh, with gentlemanliness. And the last, of course, but not of the least, that scholar must not contrive the very spirit of scholarship, because very essential thing is scholar must not cease up of being scholar himself or herself. A scholar can lock the door at the end of the day. Scholar can keep herself or himself behind the door, can have can make the self apart from, but he cannot he or she cannot apart the self from the research itself, or squeezes from his intellectual quest, or the he may can have the thought of, or he may have the idea even at any sort of odd time, whether the scholar is taking a bath or eating or doing nothing or doing the very important thing. So scholar must not contrive the very spirit of scholarship that is at the center. So that much can freely be consigned to him as fortunate or ingenious discoverer. But if he simply sits on his claim indefinitely, meanwhile refusing to let other more energetic scholar mine it, he is contravening the very spirit of scholarship. So these are the references, and thank you very much, friends. And once again, sorry for my inconvenience that two slides are not clearly visible there. Yes.
I have a question. What are some of the aspects of manners that can contribute to the intellectual growth of a scholar?
Can you please just repeat it?
What are some of the aspects of manners
Okay.
that can lead to the intellectual growth of a scholar?
So, what are the some of the
Manners.
manners? For example, code of manners. Then let's take an example that scroll. Just a second. Just a second. I can show it. No worries. It's still in that slide only, so it might not be visible there. But set of manners. For example, researcher is collecting several data and putting this into the research. Then there are distinct rules that particular researcher is supposed to follow it. Then, but still, what happens? For example, uh, uh, but particular scholar is mentioning, or guide has asked to scholar that you are supposed to collect the ethics. Then now guide is answering by looking the answers that it is not supposed to be there. Their answer is supposed to be different, but it's a kind of joke actually. But the scholar is answering as if it cannot be wrong. Now a supervisor can ask how it's not wrong, how you can come to know it's not wrong, and the answer is I have already googled it. So we can differentiate it. Actually it is not the manner of research scholar. So I hope, if not completely, but I have tried slightest of it. Another?
Yes,
Yes.
I would like to ask a question that throws some light on scientific temperament of a research scholar, because some of the things are accepted as the ritual, or some of the things are accepted as our long tradition. So at that time, what must be the scientific temperament of its research scholar to fight against those kinds of rituals and traditions?
When it comes to mind and temperament of research scholar, so for example, research scholar, we have a tradition. No, for nowadays we are in this 21st century. For example, we can use the line from White Tiger that we live in there are two India, dark and light. Then so when it comes to the particular feminist approach, so even if the majority of this major part of the society, or the major, even if the other critics or majority critics are also uh, defining that we are not in a kind of need where we need to have feminism still, but scholar, actually this is a kind of traditional norm wherein even if women are having freedom, still they don't have it. But scholars are supposed to justify it with a research, that if we just go on to if the scholar review it in general, then scholars can define or scholar can define and justify it, that even if the women are free from the particular cage or particular boundary, they are having another new boundary. Even if they want to free themselves from the particular cage, for example, if women want to do job, of course they can. We don't have any kind of boundaries. But if they want to do job, they will have to do a kind of double. They will have to manage double responsibilities. Now, if we are on this stage only, then it's better to do just household work only. If you are just supposed to have the burden of two responsibilities, so in this kind of manner, uh, mind and when it comes to mind and temperament, scholar must not believe up to any typical or any traditional norm which is being followed, but should focus on the various aspect, on the all the aspect he or she can, and then try to come up with a solution. So when it comes to the mind and temperament of research scholar, there should not be any kind of boundary, any kind of biasness, or any kind of prejudice should be there. So thank you.
Can I start still? Good noon to all of you. My name is Smita Gadhvi. Slides are.
With Namo Wi-Fi or this, are you able to connect Wi-Fi? This Namo Wi-Fi. The StreamYard is open there. In that StreamYard, here I'm not able to see that. Yes, you can start.
Am I visible and audible, sir?
Yes.
Good noon to all of you. My name is Smita Gadhvi. I will be presenting today on the topic MLA Handbook and its updates, changes in the 8th and the ninth edition. If you are using MLA Handbook, there are certain reasons we use it. First of all, it is very easy for readers to navigate and comprehend the text. It gives you favorable ideas of where to refer for sources, how to borrow the information. This MLA style of the handbook, the updated version helps basically those who belong from the language in art and cultural studies and humanities discipline to be very responsible scholars in terms of giving credit from wherever they have borrowed sources. And there is a habit of us that we don't acknowledge the sources from where we have borrowed it. So it helps you to be very consistent in terms of the using of the language, especially the academic writing. And apart from that, it also helps to give the proper attributed ideas of original sources and does help in the intellectual growth of the scholars. Now, if we can see this particular slide, already I have kind of scaled the last version little bigger. So what is the difference and what are the updates is the general question that comes to our mind. So the Modern Language Association keeps coming with a new edition in 3 to 4 years. This time again, after near to 4 years, they have come with a new edition. Why these kind of changes keep coming in certain years? Well, there is a reason. Emily believes that there is a logical way in which the new updation or the citation from where we cite changes are coming, and to attribute and comprise all the variety of sources. New edition brings it reader friendly usage of attributing or quoting the sites from where they have taken the relevant information. It is very helpful for scholars, teachers, professionals, professors to quote with the updated version what is to be borrowed, how it has to be quoted, and how it is different from the 8th edition. It is definitely to make our work easier and to keep in pace with the new resources that are coming up in the recent. So here we go again. Why not the 8th edition and why we have to refer, the current edition, the ninth edition is the normal question that comes to the mind, because there are loads of guidelines in terms of new chapters. There is a huge appendix that they have got for citing YouTube videos, different series on podcast, new sources that are coming up from wherever we see your information, and we want to quote it and cite it in the best knowledgeable way. So that is the reason the new edition there to guide us. Now, what are those guidelines? Basically, how is this new edition better? In terms of the content, it is better, because this edition, which was released in very recently, it talks about, in April 2016, it talks about uh, 146 pages, whereas the last edition was 146. So if I scale to the ninth edition, it is talking in terms of citation 367. So it is kind of 2.5 times bigger than the 8th edition. There are many changes that it has brought in the last edition, and in the style of how your academic writing has to be. Whether we write a research paper, we write a dissertation, we just are quoting from an article. So there are different inferences that are there that we need to follow. If we can see this particular slide, you can see there are certain containers. So the first question that comes to our mind is, what is a container? Container basically just generally means something that contains another work. So my work that I'm citing from a particular source might have in between, other sources where I can also, I have seen it from other platforms. In the same movie, I've seen it on a YouTube, or might be I've seen it on a DVD. I have seen it from any other sources. So there are different kind of areas from which I am borrowing it. So these are the containers that we can see. There are 9. We will cover one by one. First talks about the author. So definitely an author is very important in terms of quoting the references. So what does the MLA handbook suggest in the 9th edition? It talks that the first thing that has to should be your last name of the author. As you can see, there is an example also. I have put Brinkley, and the first name is Allen. After that, there is a periodical, and then comes the title of the book from where I have borrowed that author's work. Then again a periodical, and then it talks about the publisher. And because the publisher is not the end part of my citation, there is a comma indicating that there is more as containers coming from where I have found information. All these containers doesn't make it, very perfect for all the scholars to get all these containers. Might be you've got 5 out of the 9, but whatever you are finding, you should arrange it in the order that is mentioned in the current edition. So if particularly this example, if I quote, there is written about publisher. Now what is publisher? Publisher is talking about the source or the particular organization that, or the particular platform that is making this data available to me, where I have found it. This particular book, it is available by which source? Now that comes under publisher. And I will cite n number of examples from the simple quote that is here to cover, not in terms of sequence that is given, but what we can see in the example. If you can see, it's written clearly the year. Might be in the source I found the month and also the date, but many times in my sources the month and the date is not there, but I can quote the year. Apart from that, how is it this example different from the 8th edition? Now in 8th edition also there was an access date mentioned. Many times there was a date mentioned and we used to just quote it, but in the 9th edition I have seen it visible on a website where that date and the year is written, but when did I access it for my reference or my citation, I would add on that. There is number given. There are different numbers given at the end. Numbers can be, in terms of figures. It can be in terms of the series or the sequence that this particular, work is available. Might be there are different volumes of a journal that I'm citing. So which particular is the volume of my journal? 5th one, 3rd one, that talks about the number. Apart from that, there is a publishing date always from the source that I can also quote. Last and not the least, there is an location mention. If you can see in this particular, one of the third, if I could quote, McKee, Timothy, and James, that particular reference, if you could see, it is written Oxford, UP. What does it stands for? It is for the press, and it also talks a little bit about the the area where it is come and derived from. Let us proceed to the next slide. Here, there are certain identical examples that I have quoted to understand basically how is this version better than the previous. If you can see, there is one author mentioned. Now, what about if there are multiple authors in my citation? So if there are 2 authors, suppose, I would write the same format as it is written in this particular slide, that, the same format. But after that, I would add not a periodical, I would add a comma. I would add a comma and write it in the similar manner. Like suppose if I say Rakesh Sharma is the next particular author that I want to cite. So I will write it as it is, Rakesh Sharma, rather than writing the last name first and the first name. This is because MLA has a logic behind it. They believe that when we have 1 or 2 sources from where, or the authors from where we are citing a work, the definite style with which it is distinguishedly known, that should follow the first part of your citation. And the next author, because they are contributors together in this work, you can write in the normal manner. And suppose there are 33 writers of one particular work that I have taken, then I can write et al. That is a Latin word, to show there are multiple people who have contributed in this kind of work. If you could see in the green, it is clearly telling you gender politics at the democratic debate, show how hard it is to fight like a girl. Now, this is a subtitle of an article. Now, suppose there is a journal from which I have, borrowed a research paper. Then that journal's name will become the title. That is how we can see the title of the container is much better, because there are so many versions they have added, so many containers, and within containers you are having different passages where you can cite in more sources, so that it makes more perfect and clear to the scholar in terms of what are the other areas where I can cite the same work. If you can see, there is written title, Time magazine. Now, this exactly is what my meaning in terms of what is the title. Suppose I've taken this as a magazine, but if I've taken a journal, then the journal's title will come here, and which is the research paper will come under the title of that article. That would be my sub title. Apart from that, there are abbreviations of day, month, as we discussed earlier. What is new in this particular edition, it also talks and gives credit to URL and DOI. Might be there is a perma link that we want to quote it from. That also is very inclusive, and we can add. And there are different instructions given as per the need that is required, and how we can change and alter and update our knowledge in terms of citing. This is yet another example where, if you can see, the author's name are very clearly written in the bold red. It talks about the last name first and the first name later on, and then you are having the title of the article. As I was saying in the previous slide, that was a magazine, this is an article. So there are different sources that we cite. There are a variety of sources from which we collect information, and we want to show and give justice to that. So this is how the containers that have increased in this particular edition. It talks about 10 pages in length, this particular edition, in terms of containers. So how we can expand on terms of containers, or how we can be more precise in terms of container, that is what we can see in this particular example. There is also volume 62 number, that is page number 255 mentioned. So that talks about the number. And apart from that, there is date given, and after that there is a comma. So each comma that we use in citation indicates that there are more containers that I want to show, where I have found in the information maximum that we can show. But we can also cite those areas where we have kind of averagely found. It is not mandatory that you will find all the 9 containers in your citation work. This is very one important relevant thing that I just mentioned while I was covering the last 2 slides, that if you can see the 8th editions example, there is a date mentioned. It is 15 September 2021. And in the 9th edition, if you could see, the last part says accessed by the scholar on what particular date when they have cited it in their research paper or the article. It is 23rd July 2024. Suppose, this is just a assumption I'm just taken to show in. So this is how, when the source was accessed by me, also gets a credit and gets an area platform visible in the 9th edition. So that makes it more perfect. If you can see, again, relevant in example in terms of container, if you could see this particular slide, the first part I've taken all the icons. There are different sources that will show you where we collect information from. It can be my own device, my PC. I've written some stuff. I have seen some painting, some art, some woodwork which I liked, and I have seen some text or quotes nearby to it, and I want to cite it. I can use containers to show that. And there is an example, if you can see this particular, young adult is the literature and adolescent identity across culture and classroom. Now, that talks about the container that I was talking in terms of citation, where in a narrative text, there are different things that you can see in the context. It is also talking about literary lives of the teens. Now, when was this posted? What are the other contributors who had taken part in this work? Is also written at the end part. It was edited by who? Now, might be there is a book that was written by an author, but I want to, in my citation, also want to give credit to a person who has edited that book. So that is a very important role for editors who, add, modify, bring in new updated stuff in that same book, which is, might be an older edition and I want to update it. So who edited it? So that also can be added it as a citation in a below part. Let us proceed. Now, what is a different thing in Wikipedia that we see in this particular, edition? Wikipedias are almost banned in the 9th edition of, MLA. There is not a single reference of Wikipedia citation there. Whereas in the 8th edition, we saw Wikipedia's, important, this encyclopedias were the places where we would go to find in our work. It might not be the place where we end our information, but it would definitely be one of the sources where we want to cite it. And even YouTube is neglected. Why? Because there are only 3 examples that it is talking, and it is on the page 367, that it just gives a, kind of reference of 3 examples. And the 8th edition gave it a lot of importance. So this is one of the update that, the people are kind to, understand that what is the new change that has come in the current edition. Apart from that, dictionaries. Dictionaries are also like, authors we cite, we refer to Wikipedias. Dictionary is also very important source. So what is the change in this new edition? Where in the old edition, what was different in it, if you want to understand? So Wikipedias had a little back foot in terms of they are not enough cited in the current edition. But dictionaries, if we have to cite, we have to be very particular. Now, I would like to quote an example here, as well as if you can see here, it is written content. I've given an example below, which gives a structure, that the title entry will start with the title of the dictionary, the edition, the publisher's date, and the date it was published, the page number, and the URL, if I'm seeing it online. Whether hard version also can be mentioned, and the soft, if I have an URL, I can mention that. But if you can see this particular example below, it is talking about content. Now, content, if there is a word I'm citing from dictionary, what do I mean? Meaning, what is the definition of, content? Content is a noun. So I can cite adjectives, I can cite adverbs in terms of, what are the different words I want to use in here. And content as a definition, if I want to give on the spot right now, what is the content of sulfur in, carbon dioxide, if I just give you an example. So that talks about the definition of this content word, right? N stands for the noun. What is the version of this word that I have cited from a dictionary, and what is the the name and the label of it. The fourth might be the number, or the fourth definition that I've taken from that dictionary. There are a variety of definitions given. The fourth is the numbering that I have taken it from. Let us proceed further. Inclusive language. Now, there is a very important section that is talking in the 9th edition. There are actually, important areas where it is trying to speak and talk out to the scholars that you have to be very responsible when we, quote or cite stuffs. We have to be responsible in terms of not using negative language, not blaming anyone, be not very judgmental, not be very biased. So what are those words that it talks about? It is talking about, if you are citing, there is an entire chapter of inclusive, language that the current edition is talking, which was not there in the 8th edition. So the 8th edition didn't speak specifically about pronouns also, whereas the 9th edition talks about, if my reference is relevant, it is very specific in terms of what I'm using for. Is it for a respectable term, meaning it is positively used? That far they have gone in terms of protecting the dignity of the ethical and the citing in a research work, in an academic work. So they are consistently pushing the scholars to be more consistent, mindful, and thoughtful in their citation. That is the reason there is one portion which is mentioned, that avoid negative judgments. There are many places that we visit, and might be there is a culture that I want to quote in my literal work or my research work, where I'm being very biased in terms of quoting them. So that is something that is not allowing. It is also here in the last part saying that check the terms of offense. Here it is suggesting the scholars that now you can go back to dictionary if you want to check the offensive terms. That far, it is guiding the new researchers to make a proper, standing in terms of this arena of research. And suppose if I've just taken one example, that instead of stating every teacher must make sure that her student complete their work, you have to state that teachers must make sure that students, meaning it is not negatively to be said, so positively you can. So from this example you can understand that the teachers must take, must make sure that the students complete their work rather than blaming. Now, that is the beauty of this particular chapter that they have included, and there are many suggestions in terms of how you should be well versed in quoting. If you have doubts, they have given relevant examples which you can refer in the appendix from different sources of citation. Now, the scale part is 2.5 pages bigger. What makes it more bigger? The books and the chapters that we refer. We often refer to books, different type of chapters. So what is the structure that this new edition brings in, which was not there in the old edition? Always the author's last name, then the first name, then the title of the chapter, the book's title, the edited, if it is edited, then the editor's name, the publisher's name, which year it was found, the pages that I'm citing. Many times we don't find exact the structure that is mentioned here. Then it is allowing within the parentheses writing important work that I am finding, and also quoting from which source I have got it. As you can see, the last example that is mentioned here, Craig Jacob et al. There are many contributors, as I discussed in previous slide, that if there are many contributors to the same work, I will use et al. This is what it stands for. And how it is stated, if you can see that it is talking about rhetoric composition grain as a work, and it is a micro historical view. It is micro histories of composition where it was found, and then it was also edited. It was edited by Bruce, and it is the location, it is Colorado. The year, the page number, so specific in terms of how you are citing your work. There is yet another segment that it talks about. Now, this is a component of inclusive, language that I've taken from to show the difference. Singular they. Now, minimizing the use of pronoun, which the 8th edition was allowing. Now, in MLA, it is also revising many plural forms that were used in the 8th edition. It was not acceptable in the academic writing to state in the pronouns, which now, there was the singular they was not acceptable then. But now, if there is the situation and there is a demand, we can use it as per the need of the scholar. There is a relevant example that I've also cited to show this. Now, what about work of art? The 9th edition is specifically talking that it is very important if I am quoting from work of art, and it gives different kind of appendixes where suppose the same work is available in oil painting, is it available in wood work, what type of work it is available in. So I have to be very particular. If I'm using a photograph, there would be a different citation. If I'm using a sculpture as my citation medium, I have to be very specific in quoting it. Is it a private collection? Is it a government? What form it is? So you can see different type of containers that are adding on in the current edition, which was not there in the last edition. Then there is a very good example given here at the end to how we quote the work of art. But if there is a change in this form of art, there would be yet another citation that they have suggested in the appendix where we can modulate the same and quote it differently. So basically, there is no limit to knowledge, is what we can also understand from the current edition. They're growing us, in terms of learning and quoting things specifically. The last thing that I have come to my slide is that there are different sources, which it doesn't talk about much. Like we are very used to by the eighth edition of what is Wikipedia and how to quote it, or encyclopedia, or different sources from YouTube. But here it would also, quote many important things which we have not thought. Like it is also, as an example, I have put in a wall that is there in the, the museum or near to a Central Caribbean tripod. There is a vessel that is found. Its shape is looking like a spectacled owl. Then how do I quote it? There is a reference for that also. There are different references of what I found in museum. There are different sources of how the data which I have taken from somewhere, it is cited in the text is different, and how it is collected is can be also differently quoted. Now these are certain relevant changes that are there, but there is no end in terms of understanding what is the logic behind so many things that we can do with the current edition. And that is the reason it is a very perfect guideline in terms of different chapters, different titles, and titles further they have grown from titles within titles. And there is a huge appendix that we should refer in terms of understanding the current edition and get used to it in terms of our academic writing. That was it from my end. Thank you. Now this the dice is open for further questions if you have. Any questions, anyone?
Yes, please ask. Prakruti's
Yes.
question is
Yes.
Prakruti. Yeah, asking. It's okay.
Yes. So my question is, do you think there's a need to introduce new containers, as there are new and new sources coming up with the introduction of the digital age? So, or a need to update the existing containers? And what will it be, in your opinion, if there is a new container being introduced by MLA? Do you have anything in mind which should be included in the next edition?
Question. What is the need of the containers? First of all, I'll clear that. If you see the eighth edition, there was not enough scope. Only one or two containers were there. Now, why so many containers have come in? Suppose I've seen Ramayana on the television, how would I quote it? If I've seen it in podcast, how would I quote it? If I've seen it in DVD, the same work, how would I quote it? So there are variety of sources. That is what MLA gives in terms of citation. What is the source of the platform where I viewed it and I got the knowledge from it? So that is the need. As the society is growing, that we are also so much in the pandemic, we've learned that we have got so much used to the technology, and everyone is well adapted and learning to be more adapted. So there are so many changes that have come in the citation sources. And what best than a edition that guides you, because these are guidelines. They will definitely guide you. Then it is up to the scholar how many containers we find it. Nothing is mandatory, but the more we use it, we understand the depth of the relevance of the citation. And the next part, do I feel? What my personal feeling is that I would not say that I don't like it, but it is yet something that I'm trying to register, that a text or a quotation on the roadside or a museum, something that I found. Will the scholars go to that, or they would go to the Wikipedia for their reference? Definitely, they would go to some kind of more, areas where bulk of knowledge is there and they can sieve information relevantly found and might be from there what is required. But from a text, it would be very limiting, and rarely the scholars would go to such kind of references. Or a data, how can a data which was prepared by me and also something where I am citing from, how is it different? That is something which is yet for me to ponder over. I hope I have tried to come close to your question and answer it. Any further questions?
Yes, teacher.
Yes,
Yes,
please.
what are the core features added in this, the ninth edition of the citation style?
Can you please repeat your question?
What are the core features which are newly added in this ninth edition?
A different kind of appendix, the very huge appendix which has been added in this current edition, which was not there in the eighth edition. There are different sources where I can, suppose from an app, from app I'm citing some work, I can cite it from an app now, and I can also quote it. The DOI and the URL gets a very important weightage now in the eighth edition. Priorly in the eighth edition, if I've seen a particular episode, the DOI or the URL was not given that much weightage, but now it is given. Apart from that, there are three new chapters that have come in, which was not there. So many things have been added. There are different sections which are added. As I mentioned in my slide also, there is inclusive language where the scholars have to be very mindful and positive in terms of what they're citing, careful. So it is trying to make us more responsible. I hope I have answered your question. Are there any further questions? Yes, ma'am.
Yes, from where I should start the reading? For example, should I start from ninth edition or seventh edition or eighth edition? Or is it necessary to read all those things? Because ninth edition is giving us the latest, we can say, the information. So what do you think?
We can cite from anywhere. Yes, if I want to see the changes to understand what has grown in research in terms of ninth edition, I can cite it in the seventh edition and see the change how it was cited, because everything is available on internet. The seventh edition is there, eighth is there, and the ninth is there. But there are certain variations that have come in, as there are different variations also in the APSI style of citing and the MLA style. So similarly, there are certain changes which, according to the need of the society, certain updated versions allow us to grow more in terms of being particular, specific. That specific part is what the ninth edition talks. But as a scholar, if I'm learning, I can learn from any particular edition and see how has the changes come in the seventh, the eighth, and the same work can be also quoted in the ninth. What are the changes? That will also add on to my learning. A very relevant question. I think so. More scholars would also, learn to, cite as from the question you have asked. Okay. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, next one now.
Okay, so good afternoon, all. Myself, Surbhi Goswami, and today I'm going to present the presentation. The topic is Principle of Inclusive Language. Now, we are the research scholar, and when we are talking about the language, at that time language is uh, one which is very sensitive for us as well as for the others. So at that time we have to be very precise. At that time we have to be very particular and apt in using the language. So first of all, we should know that what is inclusive language. Now, inclusive language aims to be respectful to the others by describing, or we can say, the treating the language and the individual and the group's identity with sensitivity, and by avoiding the bias which makes someone feel that I am excluded. Now, the researchers, scholars, or we can say the students, those who wants to be inclusive, or we can say those who tries to have inclusivity in the language, they are always particular about that, and they know that my audience, my readers, they are coming from different background, they are coming from multiple experiences. So at that time, whatever language I'm using, that must be including all the people about whom I'm talking. So that is what most important. And when we are talking about the inclusiveness of the language, at that time it means that you are not insensitive towards the emotions and the feelings of other. It means that inclusive language, it means that to communicate in certain way which includes all the people, which respect all the people, and which accept all the people. So that is what the meaning of the inclusive language. Now, when we are talking about the people whose economic and social status are, we can say, disputed, or those who are having a lower social and economic status, for example, those people who are subaltern. So at that time, when you are talking about them, at that time you must be very particular, you must be very conscious in using the language. Why? Because you should include all those people, and they must not feel that we are excluded, or you are not having the sensitivity towards us. So that kind of language must be used by the research scholar, by the writers, and by all the people. Why? Because language is changing rapidly. For example, at present we are using many foreign words. At present we are using many different kind of languages in one language only. So earlier it was not so. So it means that language is changing rapidly. So at that time, when you are using the language, you have to be very conscious, you have to be very particular. Now, first is make references to identity relevant. Now, there are some of the principles which are given to you to be inclusive in your language. So, the very first is make references to identity relevant. Now, whenever you are talking about something, whenever you are writing something, at that time, the identity of the people is very important. So whenever you are using inclusive language, it means that you are using language with regard to the religion, age, or we can say the social and economic status of the people, gender, sexual orientation. Now these all the things you are including, and according to their identity you are talking about. So at that time, identity is most important. Now do not use the terms, or the terms for the identity which is excluding some of the people. For example, if I say that man-made material or man-made technology, it means that I'm not including woman in that. So at that time, the identity of the woman is questionable. So at that time, you should not use those kinds of words, but instead of that, you should use human-made. It means that you are talking about all the humanity, you are talking about all the human beings. So at that time, that word is more inclusive rather than man-made. Or when we are talking about non-specific term, for example, you don't know the identity of the person, for example, whether he is male or female. At that time, it is better to use non-specific term. For example, instead of Latin or Latina, you should use Latinx, right? So that will be more inclusive. It means that you are including all the people. Now, do not use gender specific terms when you are not aware about the identity and the gender of the people. At that time, you should not use gender specific terms. For example, if we say that poetess, or if we say that policeman, at that time, that is, we can say that is excluding some of the people, that is not including some of the people. So at that time also, you have to be very apt in your language. Now, be precise. Now, when you are talking about the language, at the time, sometimes we are using broad terms. So it means that broad terms are not including some people. Say, for example, if I talk about any problem or issues, now some people are included in that problem or issues, but other part of the people, they are not included in that. But if I will use broad term, it means that all the people are included in that. Now, some people are not having any kind of contact with that problem or dispute, then also they are included. So that is what the wrong way of talking of the language. So at that time, I have to be very precise in using the language. For example, if I say that Muslim community or Native American language, now Muslim community is having many kinds of divisions. So some problem, some matter is only concerned with the Shia Muslims or Sunni Muslim. For example, instead of Sunni Muslim, I say that Muslim community. It means that all the people are included. Now, Shia Muslims, they are not having any kind of concern with that. So at that time, you have to be very particular in using the language. For example, Chinookan languages. Say, for example, our English language. For example, if I say that English, but which English? African language or Indian English or British English or American English. Now, there's all the English are different. So at that time, I have to be very particular. I have to be precise that I'm talking about Indian English, I'm talking about British English, or I'm talking about American English. So at that time, you have to be very careful. You have to be precise. For example, do not think that all the experience that you are sharing, your audience is also sharing the same experience and the background. For example, if I say that God or scripture, now my God is different, your God is different. If I quote some line from my scripture, it means that my scripture is different, maybe your scripture is different. So at that time, it may create dispute. Maybe your audience are not from certain community, or they are not from certain religion. At that time, they may have some kind of question. So at that time, I should say that according to Gita or according to the Quran, this is what say. So it means that you have to be very precise whenever you are writing something or whenever you are mentioning something. Choose the term of identity that respect your subject. Now, all the kinds of languages is used. For example, people first language and identity first language. Now, this both the ways are accepted. It means that you are talking about the people first, or you are talking about the identity first. But how that is used? Now, for that, you should know the preferences of your audience. Some people prefer that they should be known with their identity, and some people prefer that I should be known as individual only. So at that time, I should use people first language. For example, a person with diabetes, person on probation, a person with autism. It means that first of all, I'm talking about the person, then the identity. So that is what the people first language. Sometimes the language is used identity first. For example, queer person, autistic person. So at that time, you must know the preferences of the audience, how they prefer to identify, how they prefer to addressed by you. That is very important. So that is what the language which is used there. Be thoughtful about the capitalization and styling. Now, when you are using the capital letters, at that time also you have to be very particular. Sometimes some words are not capitalized and some words must be capitalized. For example, when we are talking about the identity of the people, and if that is coming from the proper noun, it means that that should be capitalized. Say, for example, Egyptian, Mormon, Hindu, Muslim, Jew, Hebrew people. It means that you should capitalize all those words. Now, when we are talking about the community, or we can say the identity of the people, at that time we should use the language which is having the capital letters. Say, for example, if I'm talking about the deaf people or deaf community and deaf culture, so I should write D with capital letter. Why? Because it is describing deaf community and deaf culture. But if I'm talking about we can say the hearing loss, at that time I should write D with small letter. right? Because that is hearing loss, that is not the community, that is not the culture. So at that time I have to be very particular in using those language, and I have to be very particular in capitalizing those letters. Minimize pronouns that exclude. Now, some people are using masculine and feminine pronoun to include all the audience, to include their all the readers. Now, that is also the way of talking the things. That is also the inclusive language. Say, for example, when a student studies abroad, his or her communication skill in a target language are likely to improve dramatically, especially if he or she avoids speaking English with other students. Now, here we are using he or she, his or her. It means that you are using inclusive language, and not any gender is excluded from your way of speaking. Now, other are also using non-gender specific pronoun. For example, they use they or their. For example, if they don't know about the gender of the people, at that time they are using they or their to include all the people, to include male and female as well. For example, when students study abroad, their communication skills in the target language are likely to improve dramatically, especially if they avoid speaking English with other students. So at that time, they or there is used. It means that that is the most, we can say, the best way to talk with other people. It means that you are including all the people. Now, they has gained acceptance as a generic third person singular pronoun used to refer hypothetical or anonymous person. Now, when you are talking about some anonymous person to whom you don't know, who is unfamiliar to you, at that time also you can use they. Say, for example, each taxpayer must file their tax written by 15 April. Now, that is also having the singular. They is also accepted as the singular pronoun, and that is in the 9th edition. And if the people are anonymous to you, unfamiliar to you, at that time also you are using they or their. Singular they can be used to refer to a specific person whose gender is unknown and not relevant to the context. For example, I am impressed by the resume of TC Black, a candidate for the web developer job, and will schedule an interview with them. Now, TC Black is unknown to you. You don't know the gender of the person, and at that time also they is used as a singular pronoun. So that is also acceptable. Now, as we know that our audience, our readers are having the different background, they are having the different experiences. At that time, you have to be very particular in using the pronoun that is I and we. For example, if I use we, so maybe your audience are not having agreement with you. They are not agree with you. And at that time, if you are using we, so that will be problematic. So at that time, you should know your audience. If you know your audience, their beliefs, their experience, then you are using we. Then otherwise, you cannot use we. Instead of that, you can say that according to me, or I is used. That is better. Avoid negatively judging others' experience. Now, people first, not the traits and not the experience. That you should keep in mind. That when there is the negative experience of the people, at that time, first of all, you should write the name of the person, not the name of the disability. For example, if we are talking about some disabled people, those people who are the victim of something, at that time, you should not use certain kinds of word which will make them feel more excluded from your language. For example, when we use some of the words such as suffers from or afflicted with, prisoner of or victim of, it means that you are putting their experience first. They are the victim, they are the sufferers. So when we use the victim word, at that time it is not useful for their empowerment. Instead of, it is telling to us that they are not having a sufficient sources, or we can say they have suffered from something. At that time you are having a sympathy and empathy for them, but you are not empowering them. So at that time also you have to be very particular. Instead of victim, you can use the word that is survivor, right? Survivor from somewhere. So that is also most appropriate way of talking. Now, when we use the word that is suffering from, that is not the accurate way of talking, but you can use the word that is people with disability, or we can say people with diabetes, or people with cancer, or people with some kind of other areas. So, first, people, not the problem. It means that you are considering them as human being first, and then you are looking towards the negative experience of the person. Now, person battling, now that is also a bad word. Battling, it means that he has not battled enough to come out from that situation. It is a battle for him or her. Now, at that time also, you have to be very appropriate in using that language. Now, instead of handicapped, you should use people with disabilities. That is the good word for them. Now, instead of blind or deaf, you can use the word that is people with hearing or vision impairments. Now, that is what the good word that you can use for your language. Use a dictionary to check for offensive terms. Now, some of the terms are very offensive for some of the people. Sometimes we are not aware about that this is the offensive term. So at that time, it is better for you to check up-to-date dictionary, and to check that whether the word which I'm using that is having any kind of offense for other people or not. So that must be, we can say, the point that you should keep in mind. So for example, if we are talking about some of the people, for example, gypsy. Now, gypsy is the word which can create a kind of offense for the people. So at that time, you should use the word that is wrong, right? That is more appropriate with talking to the other people. Now, cite the source of a specific term. That is more appropriate. That if you have used any term which is offensive, but you don't know that this is what the offensive term, at that time you should cite the source that this is written, and that's why I have taken from that. I don't know about that, but this is written here in this history. So that is also a good way of talking with other people. So MLA 9th edition, that I have used mainly. From that I have got many information, and through that I have talked. So that is what my presentation. Thank you very much. If you have any question, then you can ask.
Do you believe that social media can play a more vital role in inclusive language?
Yes, social media is giving you a kind of language. Sometimes that is a very negative language the people are using. Sometimes that language is, we can say, broken in the parts. For example, say for example, when we are talking about the WhatsApp language. Now, WhatsApp language is somehow the language which is having, we can say, a problematic term or problematic way of talking with other people. So it means that sometimes, for example, JSK, that is written in WhatsApp. Now, at that time, I don't know what is JSK, right? Because I'm not aware about that term. So it means that I'm not included in that. That is not written properly. So I feel that social media is having a negative impact for inclusive language. Yes, please.
Here it is only private chat. So here the moment you are talking, but that is not the truth. He has put couple of comments here. That will not come in the. I can't display that. StreamYard, what we are doing is, if you have seen the previous videos, the last year's videos, then you know that when stream it is displayed on the screen. Question is displayed on the screen. Private chat, it cannot be displayed. That question cannot be displayed. So comment, and so here comment is not working in StreamYard. So that's why we are asking everybody to see, put that in this YouTube chat. Yes, now you can ask. No, it is Vipul's comment. No, Vipul, you have put, another comment have you put? That is earlier one. Okay.
How to avoid inclusive language in research.
Just a minute. Just a
Avoid
minute.
inclusive language in the research. We avoid of inclusiveness particularly.
Well, we should not avoid the inclusiveness of the language. Instead, we should use all the people, right? So we should use the language which is very inclusive. It means that no one is excluded from my discussion. I will be all people, and that is not offending for any other person. That is what my concern. That's why I'm using the inclusive language.
Okay. So okay, this is the first day, so maybe you are not alert about it, but now next time be alert that what you have to do. Okay, next presenter we can take now. What happened here? Internet is not working. So what error is coming now? See, in Vipul's case, the error was data bandwidth was over. Then you have to try another one. These are, so if you tell what is the error, then we can do. We can give you the answer in a better way if you can name it what is the error. Otherwise, we keep on checking cables only. Cables are okay, but bandwidth was over. So you have to try another login. So here also, is that the error coming? Bandwidth error? Normally it is now connect, but what it is? So if you just identify error properly, then we can solve it in a proper way also. Are you sharing it from the plus sign share entire screen?
Yes.
No, it is yet not shared. Maybe wait for some time. If no, again you have to try. It's not coming. Yes, now you can start.
Yes, good afternoon, everybody. Today I am going to present a presentation on the topic called the scholar's life. So basically, whenever we learn about research methodology, yes, and then we come to know about what actually happens with a scholar who is pursuing or who has started pursuing his or her uh, uh, PhD. So that is how we can come to know that in reality what happens to a scholar. So in this presentation, I want to talk about how this research methodology, rather than those other factors. At the same time, this the definition. If we look at the definition of this research methodology, so it means we have to see how research methodology, where we require this critical ability to think from different perspective. So that is how it is helping the scholar to pursue his her PhD. So this is the table of content. This is what I want to discuss. The first one is about introduction, the scholar's life, what qualifies someone as a scholar, what is scholarship, the pleasure of research, true principle of scholar's life, why are scholars undervalued, the conflict between scholarship and teaching, the decorum and ethics that a scholar must comply, the challenge to be overcome by a scholar, conclusion and references. So that is the outline of my presentation. So before we move further, let me talk something about this research methodology. So it is defined as a highly intellectual human activity used in the investigation of nature and matter, and deals specifically with the manner in which data is collected, analyzed, and interpreted. So if scholar is feeling something which is not comfortable to him or her, so that is because of this process. This is because of this research methodology, which is, for example, one cannot accept intellectual behavior from their birth onwards. It is how once they become the part of this research method, and then they come to know that how it is affecting them. So they require intellectual human activity. Then there is this. They have to collect lots of data, and then they have these prejudices against society or somebody, and then they have to break those prejudices. So I think that is what leads a scholar to more, rather we can say, depressed life or something. Then a system of models, procedures, and techniques used to find the result of a research problem is called research methodology. So the research scholar's duty is to find the solution, or at least he or she has to try to reach that certain value from where we can say that the scholar who is trying to find the life or find the meaning. So whether he or she is able to get that meaning or not. So first, the scholar's life. If we have to define a scholar, so how can we define a scholar? So these are the some elements which can we attribute to a scholar. So the first one is about a scholar is a person who pursues academic and intellectual activity. So it is about intellectual activities which we can directly connect to a scholar. It is not for an ordinary person. Then there is this. Academics who apply their intellectualism into expertise in an area of study. It is clear that they want to be expertising something. They are not doing for sake of doing. They have a certain goal, and that is why they want to enroll in such field. Then there is this another definition is given by Samuel Ogin. A scholar whose whole inward intellectual and moral being has been systematically unfolded, disciplined, and strengthened under the influence of truth. No one factor should be drawn out to the neglect of the other. So the whole inner man should be unfolded harmoniously. So it is about how harmoniously one can find the meaning, one can find why a person, why the scholar wants to do PhD, or why he or she wants to do a research. So that is some attributes about scholar's life. And what qualifies someone as a scholar? If we have to see that, if we have to attribute those elements to a scholar, to a person who is pursuing his or her PhD, so these are the some elements which we can attribute to that a scholar. So the first one is the scholar really never ceases being a scholar. Again, it is clear that now it is up to scholar whether they want to do PhD or not. The problems are going to come because they are going from their comfort zone. They are going out from their comfort zone. Then mull over the problem. They have to keep on thinking about the problems. If they are not thinking about the problem, then it is not going to be possible to be a scholar, or they cannot find, or they cannot reach to the conclusion. Even they cannot reach near to the conclusion. So problems are going to be there. Then the third one, the scholars cannot turn off even they wish to permit their lives. So, for example, if there are this time and again people argue that they have this social life as well. So, from how to come out from that so-called cycle. So, it is up to them. It is up to scholar whether they want to join there or not. Then the scholar has intellectual and aesthetic question. So, they have constant questions regarding this intellectualism and aestheticism. It cultivates and apply the critical spirit. So if we have to qualify someone as a scholar, then the scholar must have those questions. It should cultivate and apply the critical spirit. Whether they are able to critically look at the situation or not, whether they have different perspective to see the same thing or not. What is scholarship? So once we see the elements, once we have seen the elements regarding this scholar, so next question comes for scholarship. How to generalize scholarship? So in scholarship, there is no prejudice born out of national origin, creed, color, social class. The scholars live in the truest democracy of all. So if we go with this definition of scholarship, we can say that a scholar needs to be objective at all the places. Yes, he cannot he cannot be in certain what do we call this the shadows of their creeds or their religion or their caste. No, they have to put themselves away from those things. Then and only then they can be a scholar. So for scholarship, these things are necessary. They have to go away from these prejudices. Then the pleasure of research. Again, we can say that yes, there is a pleasure of research. Whenever we are trying to find different sources, whether it is online or offline, yes, there is a pleasure. The one pleasure we can see is the constant company of books. We can get knowledge by looking at different sources. The pleasure of travel to get these things. Again, we have to travel. Earlier it was a scholar has to travel, but nowadays due to these internet sources and all, it has decreased a bit. Then visiting libraries is their new adventure. So, for example, the scholar gets lots of adventures. They have to go from one perspective to another perspective. They have to, for example, if we look at our own example, then there are these three different papers: research methodology, then this general paper, and then specific paper. So it is providing us three dimensions. Different dimensions are there. So that is how it gives you new adventure. Then the frequent encounter with delightful and helpful people. So with time and again we meet new people. Some are delightful, some are helpful, and there are some are contradictory as well. So it gives different adventure to us. Then there are two principles for scholars' life, which helps a scholar to see or to pursue his PhD. The first one is let others know what you are working on. Do not worry about boring them. So first principle tells that we have to share our ideas with others as well. We don't have to be narrow-minded. So in a way, it helps to widen our mental horizon, and that can help, and it can. And time and again, whenever we listen to those experts who are talking on this PhD and scholarship, they often refer such ideas that always discuss your ideas with your colleagues. Then you can get new examples, new meanings. If you are genuinely excited, your excitement is bound to be contagious. So if somebody is really excited to do his or her work, then there are people who are ready to help them. In that manner, they have used this sentence. So then the second principle is corollary to the first. Keep up with what other people are doing, not only in your own field but in others as well. So we have to look at other streams as well. If somebody is working on different subjects, that also we have to see. So we can keep ourselves up to the date. So that can be another benefit which a scholar can get. Then why scholars are undervalued? So another question here coming here is about we gladly learn, but outside the classroom we are curiously uninterested in teaching. Like many modern scholars have developed the habit of talking only to each other, neglecting the broader audience of educated laymen. So the next question is about why scholars are undervalued. What is the reason behind it? The one reason is they hardly talk to other people, particularly those educated laymen. There are chances that they don't have these certain degrees, but yet we can discuss our topics or our areas of interest to those people who are from different subjects. Because normally what happens, we keep our subjects to us only, and that is one of the reasons that people are considering scholars as something inferior, particularly in art stream compared to this other stream. So we have to see this teaching, integration, and discovery and application. We have to apply as well, we have to integrate as well, and then we have to find sources of the discovery. And teaching is another way to see those things. Then the conflict between scholarship and teaching, when I particularly see that normally most teacher or scholars are working as a teacher, so they have this big problem like how to deal with such thing. We have to focus on our PhD or we can say research or to teach. When I was trying to look at online courses, I found one interesting article where they are openly saying even there are chances that those who are publishing or those who are doing research or those who are presenting papers, they are getting a good reputation compared to those teachers who are not doing such thing. But we cannot generalize that they are bad at teaching. When we look at some criteria, the results and all other things, they are way better at teaching than those who are presenting papers or attending conferences. So there is also another thing. It is only superficial and the bond much stronger. They are simply two phases of the of one high calling. As a scholar, one advances learning, and when he teaches or publishes, he shares it with the society. So, for example, they have this given the antithesis to teachers. Those who are saying that we have lots of burden, we have to teach students. That is our priority. So they are saying that if you will not publish or present something, then you are not helping society. You have to provide something new to the society. Learning without teaching is sterile, and teaching without learning is merely a way of passing time. It is more like we often hear this example: somebody has to become like a river than a lake. So it is clear we have to see the progress rather than stagnation. The true scholars finds that the two are in fact inseparable, and his life necessarily has room for both. So again, it is up to the priority, whom we are giving priorities. It is necessary to manage both the things. We have to publish, we have to present as well as to teach as well, and that is how things work. Then the decorum and ethics that a scholar must comply. Then there are some of the ethics which one can see. We are working together for the benefits of society, not for private aggrandizement. So our goal is to see the overall human beings. We have to see whether our research, whether our work is helping people or not. Scientists and inventors have their patents, but in human learning, all knowledge is in the public domain. So it is quite necessary to see that the knowledge remains in the public domain. We are time and again facing such problems that we have to pay lots of monies for research. Uh, and we hardly find those materials available freely to the common people. Property rights should be respected. More energetic scholars should be allowed to mine it deeper. Those who are really belongs to such a caliber, they should be given chance to work harder. Then the challenge is to be overcome by a scholar. So as soon as we proceed further, these are the some challenges which no scholar faces, like a lack of motivation, lack of self-confidence, poor time management, which is a very vital one, lack of focus or direction, limited support. So again, they have to see that they, the scholar is getting good support from a family or society, even from their guide as well. So all those things matters a lot. Discussion with supervisor is also necessary. Stuck in comfort zone, fear of failure. So another interesting thing is like they always stuck in their comfort zone. They have this fear that how to reach out those things which is not in their reach. So these are the some challenges to be overcome by a scholar. And then the conclusion: humanities in perennial crisis. Achievements have unreal value. The futile add nothing to the sum of human wisdom or happiness. There is a time and again question that are we helping humanities or not? So that is a big question. Research helps to understand the complexity of a problem, disapproves of lies, uphold truth, and build on to create knowledge that is reliable and authentic. So at the end, we can say, with the help of Research Ethics book, research helps to understand the complexities of a problem. What is there which is creating problem? We can disapprove the lies. Ultimately, we have to find the truth. So whether we are near to the truth or not. And these are the sources. Okay, so thank you. If you have any questions.
First of all, congratulations for your presentation. I have two questions to ask. First is that can you give some criteria or characteristics that make a person a scholar? And second one is it possible that the ethics that the scholars have to follow, being a scholar, can lead to binding a creativity of scholar?
So here I have already given this how what to qualify someone as a scholar. So your question, your answer is there. Like the scholar really never ceases being a scholar. Then mull over the problems. Then their scholar cannot turn off even they wish to. Time and again, almost each and all scholars have this. Responsibility, family responsibility, social responsibility, and then they have this work ethics as well. So these are the some criteria which we can attach to this scholarly life. Yes. Can you repeat the second question?
Is it possible that ethics that a scholars need to follow can lead to bind creativity of that particular scholar?
From the person to person, if person can be objective in his or her decision, then it is possible.
You mentioned about principles when you were referring to the slides. Assessment. You mentioned about certain principles that are very important and crucial for a scholar and his life. So, what are the principles, according to you, that can lead to the advancement of a scholar's achievement or the learning?
So again, here they have given this two principles given by Result Eltic. And if we go according to those two principles, first one is let others know what you are working on. That is the first principle given by Result Eltic. And then the second is a principle is correlated to the first. keep up with the other people are doing, not only in your own field but in others as well. So as per my views, it is necessary to stick to the basics. Now we have to accept that as we have entered into this field, so now we cannot give any excuses that we have different works and all these other things. So I think no, when it comes to ethics, so time and again it varies to person to varies. Like for people often give, particularly those who are working, that they have this job and this job, and then those who are newcomers. So people give argument that they have less burden on them, so they are doing quite good job compared to those who are working for a longer period of time. So that can be the answer of your question.
Recalling what we have made rules, and you have to face a camera so that everybody who is attending are recorded. You are sitting in the side, so you are not captured anymore. Getting the point. Where will you sit now first? You have to come in the focus of camera. Throughout the session that you are attending, you should be facing camera, everybody, all the participants. When your question comes, your question is already commented in YouTube stream, and then you are ready. That is what you have to do. That's why it is that initially, if we give the instruction, then while the live things are going on, we don't have to pinpoint those. I told that keep the list open. So if you give the list open, then you come to know that to whom you have to ask questions. Otherwise, you won't remember who is above you or where you have to ask questions. You won't remember that. So you have to keep the list open. Remember, your first PhD was cancelled, and if this kind of lethargy will continue, then I don't think this also will get completed. You have to be very precise, meticulously do the work. Such absent-mindedness is not going to help you in completing your PhD in due time. Then there also people will force you to leave midway. Does it happen first time? Okay, let us take next one. You answer in the comment.
Okay. Okay, so thank you.
Yes, who is the next also? It is, I think, Vrutti, you are the next now. No? Your lead is not proper camera lead. This is what I keep on teaching to the teachers of entire India. And our students themselves are not following that properly. So somebody is watching the live stream will say that he was teaching us what to do and how to do. But in his own department, people don't know how to face camera and how to so the things in technology. Somebody can help you. Yes.
Is this your presentation? Yes. Keep it at the slideshow.
Good evening, everyone. This is Vrutti Dabhi, and I'm presenting on tools and techniques of research. Now, what is research? The meaning of research, if we go for, and the word research is comprised of two words, re plus search. It means to search again, to find something new, to search again. The way we have learned from the ontology means to searching something new in a context of already existing in the world, the knowledge which is already existing in the world. In that knowledge, we are in that knowledge stream, we are adding something new. That is the research. Now, definition of research. Research is a systematic effort to gain new knowledge. The definition is given by Redman and Mori. Purpose of research. The purpose of research is to discover answers to questions through the application of scientific procedure. Characteristics of research. A researcher should be having courage, then he or she must be having the adequates of finding new from the uh, knowledge already existing or something new which is not existing at all. So he should be experimental as well as uh, observer of an experiences. Those type of characteristics should be there in the researcher. And types of research, there are four types of research as such. First is according to the nature of information, that is qualitative research, quantitative research. Second is according to the nature of subject matter. Uh, Third one is according to the approach of research method, like cross sectional, longitudinal. And fourth one is historical research, then case study, survey research. All these types of researches can be divided in types of research. Now, research process. Formulation of research problem in whole existing knowledge where my research question is there. When I locate my research scope, that we have to find in formulation of research problem, and accordingly we have to work. Extensive literature survey we have to do for our research by uh, visiting libraries and books, journals, periodicals. We have to go through development of working hypothesis. Then we have to form an hypothesis, that is the question of our research, and tentative assumption about the research as well. Preparing the research design. Then we have to
be very precise about the conceptual structure of our research, that is the preparing the design of research and collecting the data from the various resources available online offline, then analyzing it, analysis of the data, then hypothesis testing. In testing hypothesis, we test the facts that which facts we have collected in the data, they are appropriate to my question of research or not, that we have to go through in this hypothesis testing procedure. Then generalization and interpretation. In this, we do we build the theory, generalization and interpretation. In this particular process, we build a theory which is very appropriate for our research problem as well. Then preparation of the thesis, and then to write thesis. Now, tools of research. For all these things, we require some tools to be ready for research. Now, what are those tools? Best practice to record the route you take, identify what is available online, visit your own university library, identify your nearest major research library. Start with the internet, develop your skill in accessing by Safari, skill in accessing and finding and reviewing information, that is Safari. Use Google Book Search, use Wikipedia and evaluating data, bookmarking and managing references, citing sources. General guides and reference works like Oxford Dictionary of National Biography, American National Biography, Encyclopedia Britannica, Oxford Reference Online, Oxford English Dictionary. All are the available references and guide books. Indexes and abstracts. For your research work, you have to go through the indexes and then particularly abstracts, whatever books come in your contact related to your thesis or your topic of the research, you will go for that. And for that, abstracting and indexing. Modern Language Association International Bibliography, then Annual Bibliography of English Language and Literature, Annotated Bibliography of English Studies, British Humanities Index, all will be helpful. Then library catalogs, British Libraries Integrated Catalog, then COPEC, WorldCat, available through the OCLC website, will be for the library catalogs, primary sources and ebooks. For that, Bartleby, Project Gutenberg, Literature Online will be available. The newspapers, electronic and printed resources are also tools like the Times Digital Archives 1785 to 1985, 19th Century British Library Newspapers website, Naxis UK, newspaper Reading Room in Colindale, Times of India, full text journal articles, literature online, that is Lion, JSTOR, Project Muse, relevant multimedia material available online, BA5, British Film Institute Film and TV Database, Bridgman Education, Education Image Gallery, Film and Sound Online, YouTube. Finding and using libraries, SCONAL, the Society for College, National and University Libraries, COPEC, HERO, Higher Education and Research Opportunities, major national libraries, United States Library of Congress, BN Opel Plus, LibDex, Inflanet's National Libraries of the World, the European Library. Finding your way around a library, visiting all these libraries, if we say that all knowledges will be classified, you will find that all knowledges of the world will be classified according to DDC, that is the Dewey Decimal Classification System. In that system, general knowledge is classified from the numbering system 000 to 900, up to 900. In it, literary text follows from 800 number. And for that, finding DDC classification and according to search, we will we can use OCLC website. Again, like that, the Library of Congress classification system is also there. Techniques of research, archives and preparation for future research. Archives means historical and non-documented records and informations regarding any subject, individual or entities. For that, we can identifying for that preparation, identifying archives using electronic tools like National Archives of India, accessing and using archives by visiting and learning from archives, research techniques and skills websites, participating in research community and keeping up to date. Participating in research communities like MHRM and MLA, we can go for presentation, workshops, networking, keeping abreast of developments. Thank you.
Yes. I have a question. So many steps you discussed about how our research has to be. But what are the main things we need to keep in mind while we formulate a research problem? When we are thinking about research, what are the things we should keep in mind?
First of all, when we brood over our research topic, at that time, uh, we should go to general to specific, and in that specific going general to the specific procedure, we should be at least a brief of our coming close to our research problem. We can find that there are very limited resources are available for that, and like that we can ascertain our research topic and do our work. Yes.
What are the sources for collecting the
Your
data?
question is now see what we have done. Now see on the screen, you see what you are seeing. Who is asking the question on screen?
Yes,
No, on screen. See on the screen. Whose name is there?
Ruchi Joshi.
Ah, are you Ruchi?
No, sir.
No,
Pallavi.
then it should be on your name question. So you have to ask from your mobile phone. You getting the point?
Yes, sir.
So then otherwise it is not you. So then you have to do that. By the time we take another question. You let's ask one question.
Yes, sir. I have one question. That can you identify or list down the techniques of research that can be used, particularly in the field of humanities during research work?
Yes. For humanities techniques of research, I will prefer participating in seminars, workshops, even making a that research community, and to be in a group of research community, and by analyzing this in online resources and keeping a brisk of developments, all these things will be helpful to you as a technique of research. Even this e-skills, how to use this instrument, this device, laptop, and this online means these techniques are also covered in it.
Yes, ma'am. My question is, what are the sources of collecting the data?
What are the sources of collecting the data? Okay. All available resources like uh, e-journals, e-libraries, uh, then our physical libraries, even to be a member of a good research community. All this will be helpful to you to collect the data.
Is it fine? So many tips. It's fine.
This is yours, right?
Yes.
This is yours. Open the slideshow for this.
Good evening to all. I am Yogeshvari Trivedi, and today I am going to present on the topic titled Plagiarism and Academic Integrity. In any research work or any writing field or any academic field, if you are presenting something, you are writing something, at that time that happens that you are taking sources from somewhere, you are taking content from somewhere, and you are not citing that content from where you have taken. At that time, what kind of act occurs, that is known as plagiarism. So first of all, we will deal with the definitions. What is plagiarism? The word plagiarism is derived from the Latin word plagiarius, which means kidnapper. Till now, we have heard that kidnapper that kidnaps children, that kidnaps persons. But here, in a literary sense, words can be kidnapped. So this kind of kidnaps can be called as a plagiarism. Now, to plagiarize means to commit literary theft. First of all, we need to understand what is literary theft. As I have discussed earlier, that if we take someone's content, if we take someone's idea, if we take someone's presentation, or if we take someone particular a section of writing as ours or as person's own, that is called literary theft. That is the theft of words in a short term. It is mentioned in Merriam-Webster's Collegiate Dictionary in 11th edition that plagiarism means to present as new and original an idea or product that is already driven from the existing sourcing. Though in short term, plagiarism can be considered the act of taking someone's words, ideas, expression without mentioning from where it is taken. And this kind of act occurs in any academic field or any writing field, then this is called plagiarism. Next, plagiarism can occur in two ways. First one, that can be a intellectual theft, and second one, that can be a fraud. Then first we need to understand what is intellectual theft. Sorry, using another person's ideas, information, or expression without acknowledging that person's work, that constitutes intellectual theft. While in fraud, passing off another person's ideas, information, or expressions as your own and get advantages in your field, that is called fraud. So these are quite similar but different. In intellectual theft, you just theft ideas, information, and expression of another person's without mentioning it, while in a fraud you take someone's whole work without mentioning it or without or presenting it as your own. Next, there are several types of plagiarism. As Turnitin has given 10 types of plagiarism, but here I have found from Grammarly there are mainly the common 7 types of plagiarism. First type is direct plagiarism. How direct plagiarism occurs? That when you transcript someone's work word for word, you just take someone's work and you just put into your own writing without any quotation marks or without any acknowledgement, then it is called direct plagiarism. Second type is self-plagiarism. We can plagiarize our own self. When suppose you have previously published your work somewhere else, or you have previously submitted your research paper or anything, assignment or anything somewhere else, and then you present the same thing another time without acknowledging the previous one's presentation, then it is considered self-plagiarism. Third one is paraphrasing plagiarism. In paraphrasing plagiarism, okay, third one is mosaic plagiarism. It is also considered as or also known as patchwork plagiarism. It happens by doing act of borrowing phrases from a source without using quotation marks or finding the synonyms of author's language while keeping the same structure and meaning of the original writing. Sometimes it happens that you just borrow someone's phrases without mentioning it, or you just not borrow someone's phrasing but someone phrases, but you just synonym the language. You take the meaning and structure same, but you just change the language. At that time the act is considered as mosaic plagiarism, which is also known as patchwork plagiarism. Fourth type is accidental plagiarism. It occurs when a person neglects to cite their sources or misquote their sources, or unintentionally paraphrases a source by using similar words and sentence structure without acknowledgement. As it is quite similar to mosaic plagiarism, accidental plagiarism occurs when you cite something but this citing is not correct, then also it considered as a accidental plagiarism. Fifth type is complete plagiarism. This is a kind of plagiarism when you submit someone's work as your own, or as his or her own work, and this kind of plagiarism is also considered as a stealing of something. We steal things from another, we steal some materials from another, but when in an academic field we steal someone's writing, then it is considered as complete plagiarism. Sixth type is paraphrasing plagiarism. When a writer reuses another's works and changes few words and phrases, then it is considered as a paraphrasing plagiarism. Seventh, last one, that is source-based plagiarism. This one is tricky to understand. This kind of plagiarism happens when writer might cite their source correctly but present the sources in misleading way. There is a citing is correct, but the source that is presented in writing can be misleading. At that time, the source-based plagiarism occurred. So these are the 7 types of plagiarism. Next one is there are certain forms that how plagiarism can occur in a writing. In which form plagiarism occurs in writing, that is always based on the types of writing. So first, plagiarism occurs when you repeat or paraphrase someone's word without acknowledgement, that we have discussed earlier in the one of the types of plagiarism. Second one is that you present or submit someone else's research paper or any research work as your own. Third one is taking a particularly apt phrase without citing sources or without acknowledging from where you have taken. Fourth one is paraphrasing an argument or presenting a line of thinking without a citing a source. Sometimes it happens that we quote something or we say something like literature is a mirror of life, but we don't quote that who has said this or who has rooted this line. So this is also considered as one of the form of plagiarism. Fifth one is while browsing the web, you copied the text and pasted it into the paper without quotation marks or without citation, then it is also considered as a plagiarism. Next one is if you plagiarize in your writing. If a person plagiarizes in anyone's writing or any research work, then what kind of consequences that person has to face in the act of plagiarism? First one is the person has academic probation. Second one is if students exposed as a plagiarist, there is a assignment given to students, but a student copy it or student take it from someone else, and that is also called plagiarism. So if students exposed as a plagiarist, then students may suffer penalties. And what kind of penalties? Like students can be failure in its assignment, expulsion from school or any courses that a person is taking. Third consequence is that one can have a suspension from job in a professional field. If you plagiarize in a professional field, then it is a serious act, and the result of this act can be suspension from your job. Then damage one's academic and professional reputation, as we all are now in today's life based on our reputation, that we need this and we need that thing. So if you plagiarize in academic field, then there should be a damage of your reputation too. Then undermines public values. Again, your values can be undermined, your values can be decreased if you plagiarize. You can't be the person that is seen previously, the person you are seeing after having plagiarized or after having been a plagiarist. Last one is plagiarists are often seen as incompetent, dishonest, and willing to deceive others for personal gain. Why we plagiarize? To make our work better. But if you make your work better by doing plagiarism, by doing adaptation from someone's work, or if you take someone's work without citing or without giving credit to them, at that time this act can result into seeing yourself as a dishonest, and that is called diffusal of academic integrity. Academic integrity, that means dishonesty. You should not be dishonest in your academic field. Then if you do not want to, if a person does not want to deal with the consequences that a plagiarism can have, then you can avoid plagiarism, or a person can avoid plagiarism. There are certain rules that one must need to follow in order to avoid plagiarism. The first is prepare a list of the writers or viewpoints you discovered in your research during finding your research topics or finding any kind of material doing your research. It is better to keep a list that from where you have taken this source, from where you have got these kind of materials. Second one is keeping the following categories distinct in your note. Whenever you are taking note, you have to distinguish these 3 categories. First one is your ideas. Second one is summaries that you have taken from others. And third one is exact wording you copy. You should distinguish these 3 things distinctively. Then that makes to avoid this plagiarism in your work. Then citing sources and using proper quotation. Whenever you cite something, whenever you quote something, or whenever you take something from someone's work, do not forget to cite from where you have acknowledged this kind of content. Next one is checking with your instruction if any uncertainty you find in sources. If you do not find what kind of source I should have to cite, what kind of source I should have to take, then it is better that first check with your instructor. That can be your professor, that can be your supervisor, that can be your guide. Last one, using plagiarism checker software. And the last, you have plagiarized and you are not sure that my work is authentic or not, then you should go for the plagiarism checker softwares. Here are some examples of plagiarism checker softwares that can check your content or a person's content is plagiarized or not. They are Turnitin, Grammarly, White Smoke, Dupli Checker, Copyscape, and Qtext. There are many more to list, but here I have listed some of you. So here is my presentation. Thank you. Any questions?
How to avoid self plagiarism?
If you want to avoid self plagiarism, at that time, if you are taking some kind of content from your writing while writing another work, then cite the source from you have taken. Your own source you have to cite. Yes.
So, apart from citations, like if you are sharing some content in the public domain, for example, a video or an audio, how do you avoid plagiarism? Like, how do you make sure that the rights of that particular content stay with you and are not plagiarized further?
As far as knowledge is concerned, you should have to go to the roots from where this content is taken from, and at that sense, you can avoid the plagiarism.
I mean, if it's not something to be cited, for example, you are posting a video, right? And then, like, you want to the content you have added to that particular video should be cited somehow, right? But by posting the video, you cannot make cite anything. You can only cite using of MS Word. How do you avoid plagiarism?
I will check on it and then later tell you. Thank you.
When scholar unconsciously using any idea, information, or theory given by others, then where it fall in plagiarism category and how to avoid it.
Can you repeat it?
Yes. When scholar unconsciously using any idea, information, or theory given by others, then where it fall in plagiarism, in which category it falls in plagiarism, and how to avoid it.
In order to avoid that kind of things, it is mentioned that you have to cite sources whenever you are researching. If you will cite, then this kind of problem won't occur. Thank you.
Okay, so there was one interesting question by Surbhi has asked this question about scientific temperament. I think to Vipul or somebody she asked to Ruchi, I think. Yeah. And that question leads into this domain that the kind of research methodology we follow is very much Western method, because research is considered as a scientific process, evidence-based kind of a thing that is required. So there are many critics in post-colonial aspect. They try to question that this is still a colonial method of doing a research. So with this method and with these questions, we may perhaps get to those answers only which even the perhaps the Westerners want, or their way only. So if there is any indigenous way of looking at knowledge systems, we need to look at the process also, that what kind of method or methodologies we are adopting for our research also. And in that there is one interesting book which can be referred if one wants to go a little bit deep into this area. This work is, I'm sharing a screen, Decolonizing Methodologies. Decolonizing Methodologies by Linda Smith. She is a tribal New Zealander, and her work is on Maori women, Maori tribal women. So this work or this methodology normally tries to speak about the tribal people and their knowledge systems. And normally the tribal people are encroached in all forms of societies. They are colonized by different cultures also. So this work, research and indigenous people, and the kind of stance that is taken by Linda Smith can help in looking at the alternative to the research methodologies itself also. Okay, very quick final words. So when the question answer comes, if you come on the screen here, then you can see the question also here. You are in your PPT slides, but after doing one or two practice, you become good on this also. So the tools also we have to master. Our content also and these tools also we have to master so that whenever the situation comes, we are good in dealing with the tools and techniques also. Okay, so we had very interesting presentations. Okay? Prakruti's idea of snowballing was a good idea, and also she talked about Google Scholar and how practically you can think of snowballing and how you can find like lots of connections are there with the research. You keep on finding that one research is connected with another way, and it is never-ending chain of the thing that keeps on happening only. Maybe in this slot or morning slot, there was this question also that when you are reading something, suddenly you get something else and you go and you find another one. And then before completing the one, the next, third, fourth, fifth, it keeps on piling also. And that is what happens in research. That is why we require to document, bookmark, and manually it is difficult. So there are tools. There are bookmarking tools. So you have 10 websites, then you can bookmark all the websites. So manually it becomes difficult. So people have thought of tools. That is how the people are normally reading. It is never a linear method that once I complete this, then I start another. No, that doesn't happen in digital culture or in digital knowledge systems. That doesn't happen that once you end one. In traditional it was a book, and book is not connected with any other thing. It is isolated. So you are not like distracted towards any other thing when you read a book. So that traditional mind will say you complete a book and then you go to library and you get another book. But here it is not so. You read something on digital and then there is always something there. And it keeps on. So you require bookmarking and a new way of approaching to the research and knowledge systems also. So that is snowballing, and very interesting way you can look at that idea. Smita, Gadhvi and Surbhi, both of them talked quite interesting about inclusive language. So that is also a very important point that all the researchers have to keep in mind, that even unconsciously if you are using a language which is having a gender bias or a caste bias or a race bias, and like if somebody objects, you say, I don't believe in those things, but well, it doesn't matter whether you believe or not. Your language is telling that. So you are not aware. So that way, when you study inclusive language, you become more aware about the dynamics of the language also. So both gave very interesting examples also. Even Ruchi and Vipul also presented well about scholars' life, and it is always kind of problems there. It is not easy thing that if I'm doing a research, all other problems will not come in my life. They are always going to come. So I have to battle with the personal problems that I have, my work problems also, family problems, other thing also we have to fight, and we have to do research. So as if we are doing research, so Kainat will not make a design that we are never disturbed because we are doing research. So Rhonda Bond's secret ideas are in a way stupid ideas. If you believe in that, then Kainat will always think of not allowing you to do research. And you have to fight with that all elements that no, you try your best, I try my best. And I will win by completing my research successfully. Kainat, the universe is not going to be conducive to you. That is what you have to keep in mind. So if you think that no, I should get a good environment, then only I can do research. Well, no, that never happens with anybody. That's why Richard Altick writes about that, and most of the research scholars agrees with that idea. Also, it is always with everybody there. Um, Yogeshvari also presented well about plagiarism and other thing. A few problems with there with a couple of things. I think tomorrow we will have a better way of looking at things. As we told you that we want everybody to be recorded. Yes, Vrutti is still not listening it. It is for you, and you are not listening still. So you have to. That's why we have and arrange all these things. Arranging these things is not an easy task. This is a painful process. It is better to allow you to sit in the class or just to tell your supervisor that listen them and give me result. I don't want to do any of those things. So if you are doing that, then you have to learn all those things also, and you have to sit properly where it is said. You have to face the things properly and ask questions, proper, sensible questions. Because depending your question, it depends upon your question whether you are listening carefully or not. So if you don't ask proper question, that means somebody is judging you to see that well you were absent-minded. You were not concentrating properly in this process. So if you are doing research, you have to concentrate in this. No excuses are going to work. Everybody is in lots of problem. Even I have to sit throughout the day, so I am also in problem. It is not that I enjoy doing this. Not many people are waiting for me. There are lots of other work there. And we have to concentrate on whatever we are doing. So those things you have to forget when you are doing your research and other kinds of work also. So that we hope tomorrow and day after tomorrow and subsequently throughout the research, we will not have any of those stupid excuses about this or that. Any of those things. Research is research, and we are concerned about that this should be completed with top priority there. Otherwise, we'll have to tell you, leave and make a space for other people. There are always the new people passing out masters and they want to join research. And if you just sit down there and not complete the work, then we will have to scold you. We have to tell you that, well, this is not fair, you better leave the research and let other people come in. There are always limited seats for the research also. Okay, we end today's day and wish you all the best for tomorrow's presentation.